Here we are with session 6. So I'm going to go ahead and put our slides up, and April's going to take away our mental warm-up for today.
Yeah, this is a fun one. We figured, with literacy people, maybe it's audacious assumption that you all have, a nice relationship with books. I know I certainly do. And so we wanted to ask, what is a book that profoundly influenced you? And you can kind of interpret that in any way. I was really going back and forth because I was quite a bookworm growing up. I was a very introverted kid, and I read a lot of books. And so I was like, man, this is a hard question. So if you're really struggling with the question, it doesn't have to be the one book or whatever, but just whatever comes to mind. Um, I ultimately, after thinking about this for a long time, I settled on Harry Potter, just because I don't know. I mean, like I said, I was a pretty quiet kid, and I just feel like reading Harry Potter, like those are my friends. And like that was my mental world, where I feel like it was actually a very developmental experience for me. Like I learned a lot about myself and morality and like, the struggle of good and evil and like whatever else, right? But I'm just honestly grateful to the Harry Potter books for that developmental period in my life when maybe I wasn't ready to engage with the wider world, but I felt like I was having a really vibrant inner world, and it was a beautiful tool for that. Um, would anybody like to start us off for a book that profoundly influenced you?
Well, April, I'm going to go first because I'll keep thinking about it while other people are talking and be distracted. And I just have to, I love reading. And anyway, I'm just going to talk about one book as a former history teacher. Lies my teacher told me, James Llewellyn, he's written a lot of great books, Sundown Towns, other things like that. But I read it in college, and that with A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn really influenced my early teaching career. And honestly, it's kind of influenced my frame of thinking about any subject that I'm learning about, even if I'm gravitate towards certain books, then I try to think like, what other perspectives do I need to read? And I loved recommending those books to my students when I was teaching.
Awesome. Honestly, can people write the names of the books like in chat too, just so that we can have a reference? Because I feel like there's more than one of us that are going to want to follow up on that. Thank you, Linda. Who would like to go next? Kristen, yeah.
I'll go. So when I was a kid, I read a fair amount of, the chapter books of the day, but there was a little series that I read around, I think, 4th grade-ish, and it was called The Great Brain, and there were 5 books in the series. It's really not out there much anymore, and I think it was determined that it was a little politically incorrect because so it's about a little boy. He's a very smart little kid, and he thinks his brother is exceptionally smart. So he's always looking up to his brother, the great brain, who comes up with great ideas and gets them into lots of trouble. The reason I thought it was really powerful for me was, for one, it was one of the few books I read that had a boy as the lead character that I connected to. He was just a really interesting and approachable little kid. And he was growing up in Salt Lake City in the early 1900s, and he talked a lot about his family being Catholic and the Mormons in town, and the sort of conflict or perceptions of Catholics and Mormons. And I think that is probably a lot of why it didn't sort of carry forward into the future, but it was really fascinating to me because it reflected a lot of conversations I would hear at my grandmother's house about all of the different religious and cultural groups in her suburban Chicago area. And my parents didn't talk that way. And, to kind of have all of those pieces come together in a book that was also kind of fun was a really kind of neat awakening for me to think about, like, okay, I can connect to boys and they can be interesting people at the age of 8. And people think about religion and culture in ways that is not exactly the way we do. And so that was really kind of a fun experience.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that.
I also thought you just said it was a phonics experience, like almost like, right? Like phonics. Anyway, but, oh, go ahead, April, back to you. That's just how I heard it.
All right. No, I love these stories. Who else would like to go? And we don't have to hear from everyone today, unless you all would like to share, but yeah, Bev, please.
Well, I've read a lot of leadership books and a lot because being in education for 40 years, I feels like that's really my focus of books. Although I did like James Patterson books, but those aren't really going to influence me. But the Carol Dweck and her growth mindset is probably one of my favorite books, and I use that so much with my staff in that teaching kids that it's you can do anything and you may not accomplish it yet, and it's the power of the word yet. And I think what she says is that, you know, it's all about our mindset, that we can do things, and that's something that I would was kind of my mantra with my kids when I was a teacher, and also when I was working in leadership.
I love that. I'll have to look that book up as well. Anyone else? Other volunteers?
I wanted to go at there when anytime someone's like, what's your favorite book? I'm like, I've never read a book in my life and I can't think of a single one. So I really had to like I was going through my brain about like what are books that really influenced me. And I would have to say for me, it was reading A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. When I was in high school, and you know, this book was published in the 40s, but it's very much about that time, you know, in the world where you were starting to have options. It was like, do you want to have a career? Do you want to work for a living as a woman? Or do you want to find, you know, fulfillment in getting married and living a married life? And I just thought that was really interesting to see. And this author, it's a semi-autobiographical work, and just kind of knowing that other people were thinking about those things at that point of time, and that, you know, like notions and ideas of feminism are not like were not like a brand new invention, because where I grew up, no one talked about feminism like it was a good thing. So I would have to go ahead and say that book.
That's great. Yeah, it's interesting to hear the themes of like making new connections and worldview and learning about other ways and perspectives. Katie, where are you going to go?
Sure.
Please.
So I was not a very big reader as a child, so I don't have like a childhood favorite. But I'm a big nonfiction reader, and one of the early nonfictions that has stuck with me, and I probably read it every couple of years, is Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. I think what I took away the most and what I keep coming back to is leading yourself first, and kind of understanding the role that you play in leading a team, and the wake that you carry out into the world and how people react to it, that you have a lot more, you know, agency over that than maybe you always know. And so that's just something I come back to over and over again, and values and integrity, and a lot of the things we've been discussing have kind of resonated with me and kind of made me curious to read that again now having this experience. So anyway, that's always a great one.
Thank you, Katie. All right, maybe one or two more volunteers.
I'll go.
Please.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I was a few minutes late. So one of the most powerful books that I read in college was Reading Lolita in Tehran, which is by Azar Nafisi, and it's about a professor at the university there who has to quit during the when things got very, very, oh gosh, oppressive, you know. And she had led an all-girls secret book club, and they all read like forbidden Western classics like The Great Gatsby and things like that. And so it's two of my favorite things. Like, it's a really great story in and of itself, but it's about really great books too. And so I would say read that one if you have the opportunity. It's so good.
That is a great book. I've read that one. Jenny, where are you going to go?
I was, when, my kids right now are 13 and probably a couple of years before that, I would say in my era, it was Judy Blume, right? I mean, that's how you learned about life. So, that was just kind of a fun book that, books, I guess, that kind of went through the adolescence years. As I got older, I did learn about a book when I worked at Operation Breakthrough, which is a lower income childcare facility here in Kansas City. That's quite large. A book called A Framework for Understanding Poverty by Ruby Payne. And that just kind of explains the different levels of poverty and what's important at, whichever level you're at and how that happens. And that was, I still reference that book. So it was pretty influential.
Very cool. Hello, Tina's dog. All right, one more person,
I'll go.
please.
I'm a voracious reader, so I can't even, like Lauren, I can't pinpoint one, but two that have been really, for me, important in the work that I do is The Importance of Being Little. And I'm totally drawing a blank on the author's name. I'll look it up, but just really pushing back against the idea of what is important for early childhood. And, we're shifting towards like more what I would consider developmentally inappropriate stuff. So this is really kind of thinking, like from grown-ups, what is the important stuff? What do kids need to know and how do they need to learn it? And also a book that I found indispensable when I was working in Head Start in Wyandotte County was a book called Trauma Stewardship, which really just kind of helped me understand secondhand trauma and how to approach the work that I was doing. It really helped me a lot. So.
For sharing. I think probably in the interest of time, we'll need to wrap up here, but if you have other book suggestions or ideas, I speak for myself, hopefully also for the group, please drop them in chat. We'd love to get your suggestions. And yeah, it's just cool to see everyone has that such personal relationship with these books. And that's part of the impact that we're trying to create. So it's cool to connect with that.
So great.
Back to you, Adam.
Perfect. Yeah. I actually, in my YouTube feed this morning, I don't know how it showed up in there, but the author Neil Gaiman, American Gods author, he was just being interviewed about the 3 books that influenced his life. And I'm not a big reader, and I'm not a reader of his necessarily. I've heard of him, but I've tried to read American Gods. I couldn't finish it. But it was just really cool listening to him in the books that influenced him. Like when he was 7 years old, he read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and what he took from it was like, somebody wrote this and they had fun doing it, but I think the book that he said most influenced him was a graphic comic of the Swamp Thing, which I don't know, but I guess in comic lore that was a really big, like well done literary thing, and that's what got him into his work. And it's just hearing this conversation, I wonder how many of you were brought into this work because of the impact of reading. And now we see literacy is so much more than just that. So let's get into it. Basically, we have our POM for today. We're going to try to get through these faster, move through this piece a little specifically. But it's real. I value this, and I hope you do too. It's a chance for us to make sure, hey, are we all gonna, as we're gonna spend this time together, are we all spending it the same way? Do we have a shared thought bubble around why we're doing it, the what or the outcomes, and then the how? All right. So our focus for today, unless you have other thoughts, is to tie up threads and transition into strategic planning. So by threads, we have terms and definitions we've been exploring together. We're gonna show you where we're at. I think we should be good. We're gonna look at partnerships, and is there anybody else we want to bring in? We'll follow that conversation up. And then values, we'll finish that piece. So real quick, anybody want to share why does it matter we do those things? A couple people maybe real quick.
I'll jump in and say it's a lot of us are familiar with forming, storming, and norming, something like that. And so I think that you have to do that foundational work before you can go in to do the strategic planning and then taking action. And so it's imperative that we agree on common terms and things like that, so that as we have additional conversations, we all are on the same page of what we mean when we're talking.
Wonderful. Yep. Wonderful. All right, good. What else? Other reasons why it matters. To tie up these loose threads, make sure we're aligned on these things, make sure our partnerships, our values. Yeah, why does that matter? Why does that matter?
I'd say, as we've kind of been thinking through this, just to make sure there's nothing else that maybe we missed, or maybe people have been thinking about and want to recapture before we move on.
That's perfect. Wonderful. Good. Yeah. And then be thinking, what outcomes do we want from today? I'll ask that next. What are the things we want to produce by the end of the day? But any other reasons why it matters to tie up the threads? All right, I'm going to assume this is the right focus. And so from there, everything extends from it. If this is our focus, then what are the outcomes that will tell us that we've satisfied it? We've moved this forward sufficiently. We've satisfied our purpose for today. Would that be an outcome? We agree on the terms. We formally agree if we're there. Okay. What's another outcome from today?
Jumping to the second half of the focus, transitioning into strategic planning, just kicking it off, talking about where we're going to end up.
Beautiful. Good. I'll be sharing some thoughts. We'll get some things going. We'd love to hear from everybody else too once we get there. I think it's important too to just make sure everyone's at the table that needs to be. So we're going to have agreement that everyone is at the table, or at least invited. In terms of participants, I could have probably said it better, but nobody else offered up anything. So that's about our partnerships. And then values. I would like to get feedback on the values and see if we can even lock those in. Anything else you'd like to get out of today?
I'll throw in too that, there's clarity with these loose threads that we're tying together. There's clarity on how we're going to carry that forward and operationalize it.
Awesome. All right. Anyone else? So what we have as an agenda will hopefully address those things. If not, we can amend. But we'll review the shared values draft next. We'll talk about literacy, cross the lifespan gaps, and people to engage. And that's going to be mainly looking at partnerships. We'll take a break, come back into some strategic planning, and yeah, see how far we get into it from there. Does that sound good? Any additions before we move on? All right, really good. Also, Linda, thanks for tracking all those books and everything in the chat. That was really helpful, and you were like on it. You were facilitating us. It's awesome. All right. So that's our agenda then. And yeah, we'll just get into the terms and definitions. April, do you want to talk us through this? Or is it me or?
Sure. Yeah, I don't mind talking through it. I mean, these are the definitions that we put together as a group. And so I think we just wanted to put them up on the screen and give you all a chance to reflect on them one last time, make sure that they're still resonating. And so, yeah, I'll give everybody just a chance to read these. So I'll stop talking for just a couple seconds, and then we'll ask for any last thoughts. All right. So
Can
I'd love to get reactions from maybe one or two people or more if it's we need to get into it. But yeah, are these resonating with you all?
Kristen has a comment, yeah.
Oh yeah, please.
Thanks. They resonate with me and I'm very excited about them. My only question or idea, excuse me, is in the third one, it makes the statement, and those 5 counties invest the resources needed. And I'm wondering if it would be, in my ear, that sounds like we're talking about government funding by the county investing. And I'm wondering if we might want to say stakeholders across those 5 counties, something like that. Or is that just my ear and it doesn't ring that way to anybody else?
Yeah, any feedback on that?
Yeah. That could make things a little bit more clear.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
Probably more inclusive too. We wouldn't want someone to read this and say, oh, the counties are taking care of this. We don't need to worry about it.
Right. Yeah. That's not the impression you want to give. Would you mind just adding that in real quick, Adam? So stakeholders across the 5 counties.
All right. Very good.
Great.
Thank you.
This is perfect. Any other thoughts?
This phrase here, legible landscape, that I never heard that before, and I love that. I think Jillian or the group she was working with shared that. And I just thought, wow, what an interesting take, because literacy is about, the person's ability to consume, but then legibility is about the presentation so that maybe it could be more consumable. I don't know, it really stuck with me, this legible landscape idea as like a really different view. It's like, oh, I'm too busy looking at the words that I don't even notice there's a background, and so it's the words and it's the paper, it's anyway, I'm probably getting a little figurative here, but and that really struck me. But anything else you guys want to talk about from this page?
Well, actually, since you brought that up, I wanted more clarity around that. And I feel like number 3 is still missing something. Like that we haven't quite captured what it means to be a literate city. So one, I would love for whoever proposed that language, legible landscape, to explain what they mean there. And then I'll continue to think through what I think is missing.
That was my attempt to that was my attempt to distill the whole conversation that we were having around what does it mean into a single sentence. And legibility is something that I've talked about since I started with Literacy KC 12 years ago. And I talk about needing legible places for people. So it means that like when you walk into a place, you know where to go, what you can sort of feel what the ambiance is, you understand what you're there for and what they're there to offer you. I mean, it's really just, is it clear? Is it clear and supportive? And so that's why I like that phrase a lot. Yeah, wayfinding, exactly. And so, if something's illegible, then you have no idea, you cannot decipher it, right? And so we want a landscape in Kansas City that people understand, that they feel welcome, that they don't have to, work hard to decipher. And so I just think like if we have a more legible world, it's transparent, it's, you know, a place that people can navigate. And so that's why I offered up that language. I am not married to any of this. It was just, you know, like I said, that first attempt at trying to distill that fairly complex conversation into a single sentence. So I like the idea of, you know, putting more accountability on not the counties, but the stakeholders, the individuals within them. Yeah, so whatever you guys want to do from here is totally fine by me.
I think maybe going off Ellen's point, maybe essentially what we're saying here is everyone can read well enough to be successful. Is maybe a simplified. I don't think we want that to be our simplified version, but maybe we're thinking about, as we're talking to people about these, you know, what's our Cliff's Notes version of these definitions, and then what's our robust version.
When I'm thinking about when I was frontline staff of the library and helping people with the documents they were there working on and the applications they were there working on, that, you know, so much of that is tied up in like legalese or academic language that is, while it might be correct grammatically and it might be an airtight explanation, it's not legible to the everyday person, or even someone, you know, with a high school reading level, because of how certain fields, you know, the type of language that they use.
Great. Any other thoughts?
I think that's an interesting point, you know, and I think at some point we'll probably get into a discussion of making our city legible, but not compromising a goal of high literacy. You know, I don't want to give the impression that we think that things should be rewritten so they're understandable. But trying to do both, I guess. I don't know.
Yes, Linda, I agree. I think what I'm hearing is sort of a bouncing back and forth between, are we focusing on raising people's literacy skills, and or are we focusing on making things more easily legible, if that's the word, to those whose skills are not elevated? And, you know, I think we could get in our own way if we phrase that in a way that is misleading.
Yeah, I think if we're going to do this work in a real meaningful way, it is about elevating the skills of those in our community in such a way that excellence is the standard, that not mediocre or average at best is what we're striving for. And I think that goes directly to our values and our belief of what our children and adults in our community are capable of. And I wholeheartedly have a foundational belief that they are able to achieve if provided the tools, the resources, the support, right? So when I think about it being a literate city, like this, I think the phrase that's hanging me up is when we get to the part about living with agency. Like that would look different depending on the individual. So is this clear in terms of our work in the space of literacy? Because for some people, it's going to be health. Some people, it's going to be mental health. Some people, it's going to be economic prosperity. Some people, it's going to be housing, right? But our work centered around literacy and defining what it means to be a literate city. I think there needs to be more here without, as somebody said in the chat, making it a really long definition. I think reworking it to really capture something like this. To me, if I were to be driving down the street or something and saw this, I'd be like, okay, what that mean? You know, so I'm struggling that I don't think it captures. And I know we don't want to be so narrow, but if literacy is our work, literacy is our work. And that means reading, writing, speaking, listening, you know, comprehension, all of that. And so,
I wonder if this is the place that we refer back up to the definition we wrote, two
Mhm.
areas up, and insert that language. You know, Kansas City will be a literate city when each resident of the 5-county area has the ability to write, read, listen, and speak, so they can communicate, engage, and thrive in their world. That's what we said literacy is.
mhm.
Right. Or it could be, you know, investment in literacy across the lifespan. I think that could get to, you know, meeting people where they're at and that continual development piece. Yeah, if in doubt,
Yeah, it's kind of
refer back to core
scaffolded.
definitions.
Yeah,
Well-
it takes us back to those. It's scaffolded, but it also, I think, captures what we're really meaning to say. And maybe we don't say, well, we said each resident. So maybe, is it each resident? Is it a majority of the residents? You know,
Mhm.
we know, you know, biblically, right? You always have the poor among you. Am I thinking we're gonna have 100%? No. Can we get close to it? Possibly. I wonder if we need to workshop this more outside of this environment with a group of volunteers and then come back and present something.
Yeah, I was thinking along the same lines. Maybe we could have like a mini committee could work on this over the next week or so to just kind of take another pass at working the language. Is that, can we get a second, or is there any other other ideas from the group?
I second that idea.
Thank you. Okay, great. Well, yeah, I want to give people maybe space to think about if they'd like to volunteer for this group. And so how about we come back to it when we're doing plus deltas, and we'll look for volunteers at that time. Does that sound good?
Yeah, and I really love this conversation too. I think it gets to the heart of what we're trying to do. So we're trying to make a plan. We're going to get into planning, and we're going to be making a plan for building this literate city. So answering this question is extremely important to the planning process. So I think it's right on the money. I love the comfort with, you know, raising these questions. So it's really, it leads to better when it leads to, you know, in not every group it does, but here it's leading to better product. And so it's really good. All right. Anything else on this? Are we're ready?
Sure, everybody saw it. Patina did volunteer to work on this, so thank
Great.
you.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, we'll come back and ask for volunteers when we wrap up today.
Yeah, okay, good. We'll come back to that in the wrap up. Perfect. All right, so ready to move forward? All right, wonderful. So that's our definitional stuff. We're gonna work on this one. To do what? To work on our shared thought bubble. All right, speaking of, also around values. So yeah, basically this is April drafted from the discussion last time a faithful adaptation of the discussion. I'd like for you to read through this and let's see if this captures. And same thing, if there's something that you want to add or you want to question or whatever, this would be a great time to do that. How much time do we have for this discussion?
4
I think
hours.
we're running a little behind, but as long as we need to talk about it.
Yeah, really, honestly, we front loaded our agenda to really have the most important stuff first, and then we can flex on this conversation about strategy. So yeah, do you want to go through these one by one, or would you rather read them? All right, let's see. Any feedback on these? Any thoughts or reactions as you read them? Do you feel that these values are accurate? Do they capture the group? Do they support what we're about? Yeah, so please, any thoughts or reactions?
Love to edit literacy as a human right and say recognize literacy as a fundamental human right inherent to all human beings and get rid of tied to dignity and worth.
All right, let's do that. Recognize literacy as a fundamental human right. And then say that rest again.
Inherent to all human beings.
Okay, good. Good. Any other feedback? Good. Yeah, go ahead.
The one on curiosity, both in, oh, okay. So we're saying we need to have a both and versus a either or mindset. Is that what we're saying? Okay, that just didn't read clear to me initially. Okay, gotcha.
Does this seem like a faithful kind of reflection of what you all talked about the other day? Is there anything you'd like to add? Adapt, reject?
Do you embrace them? Do these speak for you? Do you can you live with, do you want to live under, would you want to live under a kingdom of these rules or values?
One thing I notice is that, just a few moments ago, Katina referenced maintaining our focus on excellence.
Mm-hmm.
And that isn't necessarily reflected here, at least not with that specific word. And I think it would be lovely if it were.
I do love excellence.
Maybe that could fit under dynamic process. So like in a dynamic process, committed to excellence, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just in the definition, probably Adam's word, but
Yeah, but I'm even wondering if this, I mean, maybe we capture dynamic process and continual improvement as a description of excellence, which it kind of already is in here. You know, there's dynamic process and continual improvement in the definition. Is this a pathway to excellence? Striving for excellence?
Maybe in pursuit of excellence.
nice.
Is it pursuit of or pursuing?
Pursuing, I think.
Yeah, pursuing is consistent with the other framing.
All right.
Cool.
This is good. I think what we'll do is we'll let these settle. But my sense from the group's reaction is this was really close already. So yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any other thoughts, but wow, this is falling into place. We're clarifying, you know, our definition, what we're about. And then this we're gonna enhance, and it will be built, it'll flow from these two more readily into what is a city? What is a city that delivers on this and this, right? And then our values, which will inform our purpose, outcomes, and methods. So now we're going to move into this next piece. Tom will talk to us about the people at the table and is the circle complete?
All right, thanks, Adam. So this picks up on the conversation from last week about literacy across the lifespan, where we mapped the organizations currently in the coalition and how each one serves different age groups, demographic groups. And we talked about the addition of other groups and voices to inform or support the work of the coalition. We put together a four quadrants or categories of potential coalition partners, not necessarily full coalition members, but groups who could kind of either be members of the coalition or wrap around and support the work that is being done. So you can see that we put them into four categories. The first is full coalition members. I won't read these descriptions, but essentially adding a new group or groups to the coalition, full membership like you all have. Secondarily would be groups that could be advisory groups, play an advisory role, not a full member of the coalition, but certainly we would be pulling them in, asking them for input when appropriate. The third category is just community stakeholders, a little bit similar to number 2, but we would be asking for buy-in and support, informing them about what's happening. And then the final category would be champions or influencers. And this could be a category that we would, kind of a specific group of individuals, probably individuals as opposed to organizations, that would be able to champion and support the work being done, elected officials, maybe business leaders, civic leaders, who would become champions. And so Adam, if you would stop sharing, I'll share my screen. So I did a deep dive on some of the groups that were suggested, just to kind of give everybody a common language or common understanding of each of the organizations that were suggested last week. And we don't have to figure out what to do with all of them, but I think the real question for today is, are we really interested? Do we really want to invite another organization to join the coalition as a full partner? That first category. If we do, I think we need to move quickly to begin, adding that group and then, getting them acclimated and up to speed. So the first one that there was a lot of interest in was Start at Zero, very focused on early childhood development. We'll add this to Basecamp so you all have it. They're based in Missouri. Their executive director is Dr. Wade. Their mission is partnering with parents and caregivers to promote healthy early childhood development for children prenatal to age 5 in Kansas City. Their programs focus on parents of teachers, developmental screenings, providing kind of group connections for parents and early childhood providers. So that's the first group. I didn't see anything in Start at Zero that specifically spoke to literacy. And I don't know if that's a prerequisite for joining the group, for joining the coalition. The next one was Juniper Gardens. Juniper Gardens is very focused on research or evidence-based child development and education. They are affiliated with the University of Kansas. I don't think that's KU Med. It's the University of Kansas. Their Lifespan Institute. They're based in KCK on Minnesota. It looks like they're a very recent new addition. Their executive director is Trina Spencer. Their mission is to promote children's social well-being and academic achievement by improving the quality of their care and education through evidence-based practices. They are focused on research areas, learning and development of infants and young children, social, behavioral, and academic success, school success, and then finally autism and other developmental disabilities. Again, I didn't see anything specific to literacy in this group either. Not that they aren't concerned about it, but I didn't see anything on their website. Then we have a couple of suggestions that are more focused on training teachers. The first one was suggested, I think, by Jillian, the Educator Academy, really focused on teacher development and training, again, focused on the Missouri side or based on the Missouri side. Their executive director is Charles King. Mission is to recruit, cultivate, support, and retain a diverse network of empowered and effective educators. They do a lot of training of teachers and teacher workshops for teachers. Again, didn't see anything specific to literacy. Again, not that they're not focused on it. Then very similarly, UMKC has an urban education research center, very focused on again, research, kind of similar to Juniper Gardens, which does a lot of research as well. I think a lot of you have used, I don't know how you say UWork, but or Urban Education Research Center. They're based at UMKC. Their executive director is Eric Camburn. I won't read their mission, but again, focused on creating knowledge in 7 core areas: adult learning, career pathways, essential skills, which I looked at. It looks like program evaluation is what they do. K-12 education, post-secondary ed, STEM education, and then teacher resources. And then finally, I looked at the Greater Kansas City Writing Project, very focused on writing. I think they do have a stronger sense or a stronger role in literacy. It looks like they're hosted at the University of Central Missouri in Warrensburg. Their director is Katie Klein, who looks to be an employee at University of Missouri. It's University of Central Missouri, it used to be Central Missouri State. They are focused on improving student achievement by improving the teaching of writing and improving learning for all learners. They also do a lot of professional development for schools, school districts, and administrators, anti-racism. This C3WP is very focused on reading, which I thought was very good. And then the school-wide literacy initiative also is focused on literacy education. So these were the ones that were thrown out last week. I think the question that I guess I really have is, do we want to pursue asking or inviting any of them to join the coalition? There certainly aren't any. It's like we have bylaws where we can only have so many coalition members. But I guess this is a time to have that conversation. And then if not, we could certainly find roles for any of them, all of them, other organizations, leaders in the other categories to support and become champions of the work of the coalition. Anybody want to make a plea or a motion? This isn't formal, but to add one of these groups as a full coalition member, and we can discuss it, or other thoughts or ideas.
Do we have any of us had any contact with individuals from these organizations that have expressed the willingness and the time commitment to be a part of this?
We as the consultants have not, but I don't know if
And I was just kind of like, I know there are some of these groups were like nominated by other coalition members, so I didn't know if anyone had anyone specific in mind to reach out to.
So I reached out. I mean, I did not reach out. I recommended, started 0. But I wouldn't make any reach out until I knew for sure what we were actually asking. I will say that I do know that they are in transition, that Jamisha will be leaving the KC metro area. Her husband recently accepted a position outside of the city. So they will be looking for a new executive director. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that they already have an interim in place as they begin the search.
You know, as you shared the information you were going through, what struck me is that, and I'm open I'm certainly open to the idea of inviting another member or two. But what I found my mind doing is kind of stakeholder mapping. Like, what are the other collaborative groupings that we will need on board? Like maybe parent-facing organizations or educator, professional development organizations. You know, they're all going to be needed and connected in. And I think that, to me, I feel like we're ready to jump there, potentially, rather than focusing on, is there one or two that would make a huge difference to this group at this point in time?
Yeah, and
I
we could,
wanted-
sorry.
No, you're fine. I wanted to add, I did have a conversation with someone at PNC Foundation last week, and I was, you know, given the rundown of what Reach Out and Read's been up to, kind of thing, and now I've been part of this collaboration, and mentioned that, you know, this is happening and this is what we're doing, and she said that she would love to be part of the group if it made sense for her to come aboard. So if we do want corporate to be on the ground floor, she would be a great partner as far as, you know, Grow Up Great program.
Can you say again who that was? I'm sorry, Jenny.
Her name is Kim Herman
And she's with, who is she with?
with PNC Foundation, PNC Bank Foundation.
Okay, okay.
And I think she's also part of a group of remember when there was the education conglomerate or whatever the funding group was, where there was 4 or 5 of them together. She still talks with the people in that group. So she would be a good connection, you know, for a lot of the foundations and other corporations that are interested in literacy or early education.
Well, I think that, you know, Kristen's point of stakeholder mapping, I think, is good. And we can certainly create a much broader stakeholder map of other potential candidates to align. I think, but, you know, and I don't know, Kristen, I don't know if you were making a case to not add anyone or not, but I think at this point, maybe we could just start with focusing on, I don't know if, Katina, you were suggesting maybe that we don't pursue Start at Zero for now based on the transition. But I guess, is there any?
No, that wasn't my suggestion. I just wanted to give you all transparency around where they were as an organization. So if we did reach out and they said no, or their capacity may be limited, that this may be the reason why. I recommended them last week, or last time we met, because we were clear that there was a gap and that early childhood was not represented in a real way through our organizations. And so that's why I recommended them. That's not to say they'd be the only organization, because I also think about, Christine, you can help me with this one. The one that Deidre, I think, works a lot on, the pre-K collaborative.
The Mark at Mark.
Yeah. And I wonder if they, you know, I know that they really focus on the economic pieces of training and all of that, but there's this other piece of it too. And so I don't know if they'd be another early childhood potential partner, but that's why I recommended them. That's the framework I was coming from.
Okay.
So you're thinking, Katina, that Mark, someone from Mark be in Mid-America Regional Council be involved, or that
The pre-K collaborative is not part of Mark. It's sort of based in School Smart, Casey, and Christina Collins. Christina Good grief.
Oh, yeah, Chris Collins, yeah.
Chris
yeah.
Collins runs it, and it's really focused on supporting quality in pre-K, predominantly through assisting with licensing, helping centers meet licensing regulations and accreditation standards, and increasing their capacity to serve children. But it's not part of Mark. Deidre's center has been part of it.
Deidre is the co-chair, maybe the chair now, of a program, of a group that Mark is kind of collaborates with early childhood people in schools. And that they do focus on the economy. They focus on the workforce. They talk about, they bring someone in to tell the Kansas and the Missouri side of what's going on with advocacy for the states. It's a separate early childhood collaborative kind of.
So it looks like we have 3 different early childhood initiatives, or at least 2 initiatives, and then Start Zero's direct service. I just feel like that is a significant gap that needs to be a part of this group. And I think as we explore other partnerships, that's why I asked to see what thank you, April, for putting that in the chat, to kind of see those definitions again. And I wonder if this is something else to workshop outside of this meeting, in terms of like, who would be good advisory, members or community stakeholder groups that we want to engage throughout the process or get feedback. And we began to kind of put those lists together, but I think that would take a significant amount of time to do here. But that's just Katina.
Yeah, well, I think that a little bit with what I was imagining with the phrase stakeholder mapping. It's like, what are the categories of work being done out there that need to be connected to our process? I think my thoughts are tending toward, this could be a challenging time to bring somebody in. We've already established quite a bit among these folks, and honestly, I think if we back up and look at us as a literacy collaboration, honestly, Reach Out and Read is really the only 0 to 5 organization that focuses specifically on literacy. And while we certainly need a lot more input and advice and support around 0 to 5 more generally, we aren't lacking any context for that within our team here. And I think that would be at least one, if not multiple, components of that stakeholder mapping. Is it 0 to 5 health and development? Is it 0 to 5 pre-K? Is it, there's a lot of different aspects of what's going on in the work to support children 0 to 5. So
my thought listening to the conversation is,
I'm sorry. Thank you, Kristen, for reminding me. I should know this. Jenny, you and I had our one-on-one. So I'm sorry. I wasn't making you invisible in those comments. I just was kind of relating back to our previous conversation about that. So I'm sorry.
No worries.
No worries.
so
I'm sorry, Adam. I
No,
was
go
just kind of looking back through my notes. It seemed like maybe Katina, last time you mentioned someone who does literacy professional development for teachers, and like you shared a picture of her business card. I think about in terms of, I think Kristen, your point is really good about bringing someone in at this point in the game. But if we brought in someone at this point in the game who was focused specifically on literacy, I think they would be you know, they'd be able to catch up pretty quickly and get on board. And I don't know, I just think someone who is in the lane of teacher training would be useful, as we're having these discussions, because I think we're all, I don't know, I just think it's an area of programming that that isn't represented.
Well, so does anybody want us to reach out to anybody now, like between now and the end of the year? We're not meeting, we'll meet next week and then we won't meet until January. So I think it's important to establish, I think I'm hearing early childhood teacher training. But I don't, nobody's suggesting one particular group or two. I mean, other than obviously Start at Zero has been thrown out multiple times. So I mean, the stakeholder mapping, I agree. I think that's a really good thing that we can do, but that's not going to happen this week. It'll have to be a longer term process.
I think at one point,
go ahead.
we talked about adding someone from like UMKC early education, to kind of the workforce angle. Can't remember if we discussed anywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that was I don't think it was a specific name or group. At least I didn't capture it if it was.
I think they have a early childhood program. That would probably be a great place to start.
Okay.
And then don't kill me because I didn't say this last week. But I'm sitting here, I was kind of thinking, mulling in my brain, who else is doing specific literacy work? And the W.E.B. Du Bois Learning Center focuses on literacy support during after school hours. I know they have limited capacity, but I know they also want to grow and they need to be connected, I think, to work like this. So as we begin to do that stakeholder mapping, I don't know if we look at bringing them into this particular group or being a partner in another way. But I certainly think it also lends itself to when I look at this group and we want to embrace belonging and inclusivity, that we also have to look at organizations that serve BIPOC communities in this space.
Okay. Yep, taking note, and I've got somebody had suggested the School Smart group, the Educator Academy, Teach for America, City Year, Latinx, I mean, all those groups too. So yeah, I think these are all, I'm hearing a lot of really good suggestions for the stakeholder mapping.
And then one last thing, and I'll shut up because I feel like I'm taking up a lot of voice space, but I also want us to think about, consider, ponder, if we will get into the space of working with educators or educator training programs. That's a lot to do. And it's a lot of red tape and politics and all the things that come with that. I don't necessarily know that I want to venture down that path. But there may be others that can justify or give a reason why we would want to do that. And I'm open to being convinced otherwise. But, you know, I just think that's something for us to really seriously consider, and the why or why not behind it.
Yeah, because we have a lot of teacher training groups on the table. So I think we're going to have to, and if we want to go down that road, I guess. All right, well, I'm gonna go back to what Kristen said, that the group's already formed and we're working on establishing ourselves. I'm gonna make one final call. Does anybody want to nominate a group, not an individual, but a group to join the coalition, like in the short term, in the next, before the holidays, before we move forward, we could reach out to them this week. All right, well, I think then my thought from this conversation is we'll move this conversation into a stakeholder mapping project that we could then get all of these groups labeled and then start to categorize them based on the categories that have been developed. And then, yeah, I think why don't we as consultants can talk about how to best do that. Obviously, it is probably a outside this we won't necessarily spend coalition meetings doing that. So but I'm not hearing anybody make a plea for, yes, start at 0 now to join the coalition, or ask Juniper Gardens, or ask the UMKC early childhood people. So all right, very good. I think we're ready for a break, I think, Adam, right?
All right. Yeah, I think so. We've covered a lot of ground. So why don't we do that? Why don't we take a 5-minute break, allow a moment to stretch, and we'll see you all back here in just a few minutes. Let's see how we're feeling about our progress so far. Any lingering thoughts or questions or input you guys have had or would like to have? All right. You guys, we're going to talk about strategic planning, and I want to free myself up to be able to say things and then have you feel free to do what you want with those things. Accept them, reject them, make them fit for you however you want, because strategy is a really big deal and everybody has a different view of it. For me, it's a big part of my work in organizational development, because it's really what the central activity of an organization is. How do we deploy our resources to get to survive, and beyond that to thrive? And I think for individuals, planning plays the same purpose. The same idea is, as an individual, I have X amount of resources. How do I want to spend those in order for me to reach my understanding of what survival is, and especially what thriving is? And that's what we're all trying to do. I just think we're really bad at it overall, has been my experience. Look, 9 out of 10 strategic plans fail. That's the basic statistic. I mean, you can, so whenever an organization wants to do strategic planning, I'm nervous about a 10% success rate and what's going on. And I'm going to share this. I haven't shared this slide in a long time. I created it 20 years ago to describe what I'm talking about. Basically, what I realized coming into this field, because I was only in this field for about 5 to 7 years at that point, is when it came to strategic planning, everybody treated it like an event, a retreat, or we're going to take a day, or we're going to go and we're going to make a plan. And then we make the plan, and then I notice, okay, then we come back the next year and we go, well, how did we do on the plan? And then we make a new plan. And I'm like, okay, is that really the way it's supposed to work? Like, it's a once a year check-in, and then what do you do in the rest of the 364 days? And so then I started realizing, well, leadership or strategy is more of a process. It's actually not something you do in one event. It's actually, there might be several events or a sequence of things that happen, over time. So this kind of shape of the little arch is kind of my little symbol for strategy. So is it this one little event? Is it a process? And then I started thinking about it a little bit more, that it's a discipline. It's actually, and if I were to use a word now, I would use the word, it's an activity. And because we convert it into an activity, that means there's a scale, a range that we could get good at it, you know? And I have a little meter I do of this, but we don't need it right now. You get the idea that like down here, I might have a fixed mindset. Like, I don't know what strategy is, and I don't care to get better at it, and leave me alone. And a growth mindset says, you know what? I want to get better at it. I think it's important. I can get better at it. I want to get better at it. I'm willing to invest to get better at it. And that's how I want us to view it. So let me just stop there. Any reactions to that? Based on your experiences, does that fit with anything or no, or?
I like where you're going with that, Adam. You know, it isn't one time a year that we assess everything. We have to have goals, and we have to continually be moving and you know, processing and changing and updating and making new goals. So I like that.
Awesome.
I like the idea of the level of discipline or activity. And I think that speaks to, you know, what they used to say about make the plan, put it on the shelf. And I think just working in education for so long, you were so busy doing other things that that's what you had to do. And it was just when the state or whatever accrediting agency told you, you had to get the binder back down. That's when you did it. So I like that idea.
So this is the challenge. And so early in my career, I learned something, and I thought, okay, everybody probably knows this, and I'm learning it too. You know, I was in my late 20s, and I was part of a consulting project, and when I explained it, and the reason I thought everybody knew it is it just made such good sense. It's like, oh, I should have known that, but I wasn't there that day in school or something like that. And this was presented. Did I tell you about Keith Brook before? I did that with you all? No, not with this group. All right, so it's a crazy guy I met. He shared this model. I haven't been able to find him since, or this model, and I've adapted it along the way. But basically what Keith said is that there's 3 roles in any organization. It doesn't matter if it's a large school system or a single parent household. You have to play these 3 roles in order for your organization, your household, maybe, you know, that's not an organization, but or an institution, to survive and or thrive. And the 3 roles are the strategic role, where you have to think out 1 to 3 years. He broke it down into time, task, and territory. You know, you think out 1 to 3 years. This stuff I'll get into later. That's just a lot of word stuff I've put together. But essentially, you know, you're thinking about, you know, maybe think about for your agency, you know, what's our market? Or, you know, we're a branch of of a national organization here in the Kansas City area. Or, you know, we got to be thinking about the future. You occupy a territory. We're going to be talking about the territory of literacy and Kansas City. So we're being strategic about it. Now, every organization also has the tactical role, where you have to take those strategies, because strategies are long-term, big picture. They require a lot of things. They're involved. You break a strategy down into tactics, though. And that's, you know, where you're thinking maybe 1 to 12 months. You're thinking more in terms of projects instead of a big old strategy. You're maybe looking at a particular site you're trying to impact, or a certain function you want to improve, or something like that. That you're taking on, a specific thing you're doing. And then tactics break down into operations, or I use this other word interchangeably, actions. Actions are like single step things you do, and they're the day-to-day, and it's about the core business, and it's about getting things done. And so it really helped me realize that maybe in your organization, you have people that are meant to play the strategic role, but they don't know what that role is. So they end up worrying and focusing on operational things. You see boards of directors, for example, getting involved with stuff like that. And so what happens is, if the board thinks doing this stuff is the strategy, you know, this stuff, then who's doing this stuff up here? And it's putting the organization at risk. And what happens is I've learned that people don't really learn the strategic role. That's not really taught. You just kind of start off, you join organizations, usually at the operational layer, and then you get promoted to a manager. And then if you survive all the politics and all that, then maybe you get moved to an executive level, you know? But thinking about organizations this way and every entity, it's like, we need to, so for this coalition, we need to be thinking about the strategies, the tactics, and the operations or the actions. We got to incorporate all of it. But this idea of strategizing or this discipline of strategy, what is involved with it, and that's what I've been interested in trying to make it so that we could do it better. Okay, so doing it better, though, is kind of what this article. I'm thinking about sharing it with you all if you want. Maybe we can talk about it for homework. But I read this a few years ago, and it really was a nice article. It was a study of, like, you know, strategic thinking and what's going on with it, and are we any good at it? 43% managers, like in organizations, can't state the strategy of their organization. That's interesting. Most of them believe that their managers are usually the tactical layer, so they're saying the strategic layer is bad at it. They're just not good at it. All right. So why? What are the reasons in this article? And basically, kind of to what Chris was saying, are we taking the time to do it? Do we even make the time to do it? Is there a commitment to the strategy? Because some people aren't really committed to it. Do we have are we clear on our priorities? Are we staying with the status quo? Do we not understand what strategy is? Or if we do we have the tools for thinking strategically, or no? Have we never been taught those either? Are we aligned? And that's a big one. For me, it's alignment on 3 things, and bonus points for whoever can name the 3 things. The 3 areas of alignment. We do it every day when we plan our agendas, every meeting like this. Are we aligned on our purpose, our why? Are we aligned on our outcomes, our what, or to what ends? And are we aligned on our methods for how we're going to get from our purpose to our outcomes? The how. Okay. So, so then firefighting. So think about this. We're all going to be wanting to build a coalition, but you all have your organizational priorities that aren't being dialed down, that I know of. So to what degree are we going to be having to manage, you know, the individual fires we all fight, and then this big, large fire we want to fight together? Something that you started to address with the map, GeoMap, you know, are we the data, and do we know the landscape of this issue and the issue that we're trying to address? And, you know, what's our organizational direction? It's like, are we an organization yet? Where are we in that? Are we becoming an organization? How are we being organized? So these are all some of the challenges, and I'm sure there's more, but any reactions to these as kind of, you know, challenges to why strategic planning may not happen, or why we may not be that good at it? Any reactions from you all?
I definitely have seen in my career in the past a misalignment between the people creating the strategic plan and the people like the people in the S sphere and the people in the O sphere in big organizations where there are very clear definitions between between those 2 groups. And so you're getting this document handed down to you saying, guess what? Your whole jobs are going to revolve around these key performance indicators for the next 5 years. And I've seen how that pans out, and it's not always great. It's rarely great. It's rarely great.
Thank you for that. Yeah, right on. I want to speak to that too, but any other comments before? Any other reactions to what we're talking about so far? Are you seeing this in your organizations at all?
You know, one of the things I've experienced, because most of my career, at least the part in which I held a leadership role, was in startups, or currently not a startup, but post-COVID. Like, I stepped in immediately post-COVID. So kind of a startup, like
Mhm.
everything kind of starting over. And I've always struggled to manage like being either creating or being responsive to a strategic plan that's in place and being agile enough to navigate the continually changing landscape. And it's made me like develop a very anti-strategic plan mentality, because it's like you put things out there for 3 years and we've all now experienced that everything in the world can change in that 3-year time. So like, what are you then held to, or how does that support your thinking? So I'm just saying that because you'll know I have a kind of a pissy attitude about strategic planning.
I do too. And for the same reason, it's disjointed from what the rest of the organization's doing. So it becomes an extra manager, an extra burden. It's an extra set of tasks that are probably the right things to do, but no one's alleviating me of the current tasks. And so this is the problem, is the strategic plan is divorced from the organization. And that is what the STO model is about. So I want to show you this. And this is in response to Lauren's comment too, is you know, I showed you what a healthy STO looks like, you know, STO. By the way, I want to acknowledge these cusps here are very important. These roles here of, you know, let's say you have a board, but then maybe you have the executive director, you know, and, you know, maybe VPs, or depending on how you play that role. Then you have your management role layer, and then maybe your operational layer, your volunteers or something like that. Well, you need a volunteer coordinator, right? Or something like that. So, so what I want to show you are different ways that the STO can become disformed. This is the healthy one. But sometimes if this cusp breaks, then you lose that operational layer, the layer that really makes things happen. Gets disjointed from maybe the tactical and strategic. Or sometimes what you have is the strategic layers, the board of directors has this idea and they're going off, but it's detached from the organizational realities. And what I see more and more with what I work with a hospital, and I see this a lot with their managers are getting the crunch. Their operational layer isn't performing fully, so that puts more upward pressure on them. And then the strategic layer has ambitions and things they want to get done, and so they're forcing, and so this stress happens here. So you can see these are just different deformations that could happen. Now, this way of looking at it isn't my favorite way. It's just a way to introduce the role distinctions. If I were to make it look more proportional, this is what I like. I like this view, S, T, and O in an organization. And I'm going a little deeper into this than I totally planned, but it's feeling right. Like it's feeling like helping us clarify, you know, getting a cleared mindset of an organizational structures. So here is where I'd put the purpose of the organization, which a lot of times people refer to it as the mission. It's supposed to be an M. And then values too, I might include there more and more now. At the core of the organization, our why. Why do we exist? Why are we here? Why are we getting together? Why, you know, like, why are we bothering ourselves? We already have organizations and jobs. Why are we coming together and meeting once a week and having this long-term vision? Because we have outcomes we want to reach, outcomes that are out here. I'm putting them out into the world here. This O is for operations. It's a different O. So just to be clear, these O's are your outcomes, the results, the literacy you want to produce in the people of Kansas City. That's where the outcomes are. And they happen from your operations or actions. Because the only thing in my view that produces an outcome is an action, or operation is the same word. It's actions that produce outcomes. It's not a purpose. It's not a strategy or a tactic. Those guide us to what is an action versus what is emotion. And this is another word I want to introduce, because motions look like actions, but they're imposters. They're not connected to tactics or strategies or purpose. They're things we do because we always did it that way, or that was in my job description, or they're remnants of the way we used to do things. But the problem with motions is they cost resources. That's the problem with them. They're not benign. Sorry about my handwriting. I'm using a mouse when I do this. Actions also cost resources, but they're more deliberate because they're tied to tactics, which are tied to strategies, which are meant to really give legs to your purpose and bring it about. So I would take a slice of this, let's say, you know, because you might have like 4 to 6 strategies in an organization. And then what you want to do is take that strategy and convert it into tactics. Because strategy, like I said, it's a very broadly worded statement for how we're gonna go from our purpose to our outcomes. But it's still broadly worded. It's meant to be that way. So we want to get it more clear. We want to break it down. We want to break down, I say, the big gear. I call the strategies are big gears by identifying the smaller gears. And then your tactics are then, you know, broken down into individual steps. You get action plans, right? You break them down into first we do this, then we do that. And it's in doing that that we're producing the outcomes. So yeah, I'll stop there. This might be a lot. I might be having more fun with this than you are. Any reactions?
I know at one point in time, Lauren and I had talked a little bit about sometimes the challenge of communicating all that clearly. And based on the size of your organization, that can be a little bit more challenging than others, you know, where everybody kind of understand how everything is connected and it's flowing. Yeah. So yeah, this is just a good reminder about how those can be some challenges.
And it's what healthy organizations look like. And Katina, to your point too, yeah, I'm a fan of that work. Yeah, what you'll find is what I'm describing here will connect to so many bodies of work that you probably are familiar with already, because all I'm doing here is stating what's at the substrata of all of this, of all the stuff around organizations. And what are they? Organizations are entities that convert resources into outcomes. So if we become a coalition, we're going to convert resources into outcomes. And our purpose is going to describe why we're doing it. And our outcomes are going to describe to what end that purpose is realized. And then our methods are going to be broken down into strategies. We're going to identify strategies. And then those strategies will be broken down into tactics. And then those tactics will be converted into action steps. And then that's what our organization does. Our strategic plan is also our operational plan, which is like, I know it's like so unheard of, but that's what we're going to do. And I suggest all your nonprofits individually do it too. Right? I mean, like, yeah, because we only have a finite amount of resources with which to produce our outcomes. And that's what we're up against. And what we're doing then are methods. What you do every day are methods. Either you're doing operations, working on a tactic, or that's part of a strategy, or you're doing motions, which I call doinking around. I don't know why, but that's like my phrase. You're either being strategic or you're doinking around. And I kind of divide it into those two things. Yeah. All right. So now those are the principles, and now I want to show you a game plan, a set of steps going forward, and we're already into it. The identification of values you could see is already part of it, you know. So the tool I use is called the game plan. So let me stop. I'm doing a lot of talking. This is becoming a lecturette piece. But I need a sense of if this is valuable for you, and if this is, yeah, and if it's, I'm trying to build a shared thought bubble for where we're going to go together, because strategic planning it's challenging because we all have different ideas of what it is. So I'm trying to get us moving down the same path. So yeah, we got some thumbs up. Thank you. That's helpful. All right. So now I'm going to show you the game plan. There we go. I have too many documents open. So this is it. This is a document that's taken me basically 25 years to create right here. This thing. I'm a little slow, but it's basically the steps of what I'm describing. And here's the legend to kind of guide the way. You can see the colors correspond even, right? That we're going to engage our resources to align the factors for us, for Kansas City, to thrive. That's what a strategic plan would be. For you individually, if you're going to make like your New Year's resolution, it's basically, hey, I'm going to take these resources, my time and my energy, my calories, my attention, my money, and I'm going to spend it on these things because this is what I think will lead to a really great year. Tom and I used to do this process called your best year yet. And it basically follows this model. All planning does. That's what I'm saying. I'm not introducing to you anything advanced or new. I'm kind of showing you the substrata of everything. But what I'm going to do, so I say we engaged our resources to align the factors so we could thrive. But when I talk through it, I actually go in reverse order. I start here because I want to know what thriving looks like. And thriving is a relationship between your purpose and your outcomes. I know it's a weird way to look at it, but think about times you were thriving in your life. That means the outcomes you were experiencing were consistent with what you were about at your core, your purpose, And if you were experiencing times in your life that you weren't thriving, maybe the other end of it that I call suffering would be over here. If thriving is when your outcomes positively reflect your purpose, then suffering, the opposite of thriving, is when your outcomes reflect the opposite of your purpose. They go in the opposite direction, right? So that's a subtle point. That's not like everybody, I've heard that anywhere. It's just, as I've been working with this content, it became a way for me to define what thriving is. And that way it's not so vague, because purpose we can always identify. The way we identify purpose, we've been doing it. The way we identify purpose is to just ask two questions. One, what is our focus? Because I have to know what we're talking about. I have to lock it in. Otherwise, it's going to move around. Have I shown you this before? This? Okay. So yeah, I bought this because it's a big obnoxious version of this common tool we had in our little supply package as students maybe, And I'd always stab myself with this thing right here, this pointy end. Why is it so pointy? Why? Does anybody know? Why?
Stab it into the paper.
Yeah. So it doesn't move. Anchors you. I think of this as purpose. Right? Your origin, your point of origin, your why. And then I think of the pencil end as the outcomes. Like, why do we have this thing? So we can make the circle, And so the pencil end represents outcomes. And you want your outcomes to reflect your purpose. You want this to make a nice circle. You don't want it to make all jumping around, right? That's why the stabby end has to be there. Your purpose has to be pretty anchored. Your outcomes then reflected are an extension. Now, what's the space represented between your purpose and your outcomes? And it starts with an M and rhymes with schmethods. The methods. So yeah, strategy, tactics, operations, the further you get out, the more minutes there are, seconds or minutes and hours, however you want to see it. All right. Paragraphs are this way. Essays are this way, right? It's like paragraph, sentence, word. So okay. There's a lot I'm rolling out here. Back to the game plan. Let's do that. So purpose is your anchor point. Your outcomes then reflect where you want to go. And purpose is I don't even have the word purpose here. I just have select your focus and state why it matters, because that equals purpose. But I didn't want to use the word purpose in here because it weirds people out sometimes. It overwhelms them, or they go, well, what's the difference between purpose and mission? And I'm like, okay, we're getting into the word stuff and I want to simplify. So I don't use the word mission, by the way. I'm not against mission. It's just the problem is mission in business is purpose. but mission in the military is outcomes. So I just want to avoid that. So I say purpose. And goals are the same as outcomes, milestones. You know, your vision also is your outcomes. I think of your vision as the totality of the outcomes you want to produce taken together. So I just simplify purpose and outcome language. And so that's where we're going to start, especially now that we have our values, is we're going to start with the pointy end. We're going to state what is our focus of our coalition and why does it matter? From there, we'll be able to bridge outward and state the outcomes that we want that would reflect what our purpose is. Like, well, you're going to have complete say over that. And then we're going to get feedback from your stakeholders as well. But then we have to ask the question, if those are the outcomes we want, if this is what thriving looks like, is another way to say our outcomes. I say thriving is the universal outcome, because if I know what you care about, I know what you want for it. You want it to thrive, which means grow, succeed, be well, you know, make meaningful progress is my favorite way to say thriving. Thriving is making meaningful progress in relation to your focus or your purpose. So once we do those things, then I'm going to ask you, well, if this is what once we populate it with all your details for what thriving looks like for literacy in Kansas City, then I'm going to ask you a question. I'm not going to ask you what your methods are, but it'll get to them. I'm going to ask you, what are the factors that are absolutely necessary for you to have those outcomes? And we're going to grow a list. We're going to grow a big list of that. And then we're going to organize it into basically 3 levels. The highest level will be the strategic level. And then we're going to break up, every strategy will be broken down into tactics. And then tactics will get broken down into action steps. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, I'm just going to tell you all of it. We're going to look at each strategy. You'll have between 4 to 6, maybe more, maybe less, probably not less. And we're going to look at each one and we're going to say on a scale of 0 to 10, is that strategy where it needs to be? That's a 5. Is that strategy where it needs to be? Oh, it needs to be an 8, but it's only at a 3. Then our tactics are going to be about how to go from a 3 to an 8. Because what we're saying is if we get to an 8 on this strategy, we will start producing our outcomes. And we're going to do that for each one of our strategies. And you're going to decide what those are. We're going to decide together. We're going to figure it out together. And we're going to identify where is each strategy, how aligned is it, and meaning, is it in the right shape that it needs to be? So if we're saying measurement, metrics, a way to measure literacy is going to be essential for our outcomes, then one of our strategies might be measurement, or partnerships might be another strategy. And then we're going to say, is the strategy where it needs to be in order for us to have our outcomes that represent our purpose? So how are we going to get these? And then once we do that, how are we going to get from a 3 to an 8? How are we going to get our tactics turning to get it from a 3 to an 8? Well, we're going to invest our resources. And that's what engagement is about. Engagement isn't just about attention or attitude. It's about spending any resources. How are we going to spend them? We got lots of questions to answer about them because you have resources that are going to your current individual organizational operations. And then to what degree are we going to move resources, if at all, to a coalition? To what degree are you going to take your organization's own individual factors and all organizations, all 10 or however many of us are represented here, to what degree are we going to form common factors that we're going to be working on together? These are the questions. That's my primer. I'm just bothering you with them for now. What do you think? What's your reactions to any of that so far? Does it give us a shared thought bubble for where we'll be going next? We're going to be working on purpose, then we're going to be working on outcomes, and then we're going to be working on those factors, those gears, those methods. And then we got to do them. Then we got to actually do the action steps, turn the action gears, that turn the tactics gears, that turn the strategy gears. But as we do, we're producing the outcomes. And this to me is the substrata of all planning. And we'll have different tools and techniques for how we will, fill in the specific strategies and tactics, but we'll get there. All right. Any reactions, please? I asked for it and then I talked more.
I really like the visual. I think these are all great words that I'm familiar with and the ideas, but kind of seeing the structure around them was really helpful, and I can see how it will apply to us as a group as we move forward. This gives me some good energy for like where we're headed, and what action we can actually take and how we will get there, and how we will be more thoughtful in taking those actions. So that feels great.
I'm really excited to go through this process and then steal all of this good work and bring it back to my organization, because we will need our new strategic plan by next year, and this is so much better than what I came into. So this will be wonderful.
I thought you said you hated strategic planning.
Not anymore.
But I'm gonna like this.
But it's why we hated it, it just, yeah. Yeah. So here, it takes a couple times hearing this, by the way, too. Like I know that for me, it's required several passes before I lock in the relationship of the things and the sequence of the steps. But when you do, it just falls into place. And then we can speak this language as a group. We'll know if we're needing to work on our tactics or if we're aligned on our purpose. We'll know where we're at. And then this is what I want to say too, and just run this against your own experience in life. But when there's drama, when there's misalignment or contrast, it's usually because we misalign in one of these or more of these three areas. Usually you and that other person or people weren't aligned on the purpose, the origin, the why, but we don't have language to talk about it. So it makes sense. It's not anybody's fault. It's just why and purpose live in the background of obviousness. And it's not unless you talk about it that you bring it to the foreground, right? Or maybe you have the same purpose in mind, but your outcomes are different. And then you're going to be pulling in opposite directions and wondering why, because we started so strong, right? Our purpose. And then, but maybe you are aligned on outcomes. Wow, we're here for the same reasons and we're going in the same directions, but it's like, wait, don't do that with our resources. We should be doing this with our resources. And so many of the conflicts are really arguments about, hey, you're not spending the resources the way I think you should. That may sound weird for me to say it that way, but like run it through your experience, like have a conflict today and then go, oh, wait a minute. You think we should have spent our time this way and I think we should have spent it that way. Or at some layer, conflict is usually around how we spend resources differently. So these tools, yes, I would love for them to, help your work outside of this coalition and help you be more strategic. And maybe this is almost like a mini class in strategy, because what is strategy? The word strategy does come from the word stratify. They have similar origins. And stratify is how am I going to distribute or spread resources across competing demands? And that is strategy. Strategy is, how are we going to spend our resources across these competing demands so that A, we survive, and B, we thrive? And whoever does that is the great strategist. Yeah, okay, I'm getting my 3-minute warning. All right, I love this stuff, so I'm sorry I geeked out a little bit, but let's bring it in for our wrap up. Does that sound good? That is, if we have a choice. All right. So, yeah, pluses and deltas for today. Anybody have any pluses or deltas? Or pluses? Go ahead.
I think I have a delta in that it's a really, the timing is not great for us to be thinking about inviting new organizations. Just like the time of year is rough. And there are some, I realize that there's probably a rhyme and a reason for why this task was located in the coalition building process that it was, but it also feels like it could have happened a little bit earlier, or if just, because of the schedule that we're on, it's just, it feels a little late.
Okay, thank you. Yep. Other pluses or deltas?
I think it was exciting on the plus side to hear the game plan. I think, I can't remember how you said it, Katie, about it's kind of energizing to kind of be at what feels, like a transition point, to hear how the rest of the process will go.
Other pluses or deltas? All right. If you have any others, feel free to let us know. But I mean, I don't really have any specific for next week. I just jotted that from our earlier discussion. What does it mean? Maybe we have more work on what does it mean for KC to be a literate city?
Mhm.
And then also maybe more work on exploring the potential partners.
Yeah, I wanted to come back to the question from earlier today, if anyone would like to volunteer for the committee. I know Katina offered to do that, but to kind of workshop a little bit further, what does it mean for Kansas City to be a literate city? If there are any volunteers for that, I guess speak now, or you can let us know, later today, and we can take that off. But yeah, I think the expectation would be to meet sometime this week to workshop that a little bit more.
I think Tina is volunteering.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you, Tina.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't see your hand. Awesome. Well, thank you, Ellen. That'll be great. Okay. Perfect. Well, if anyone else wants to
Put in
join
the
the group,
chat too.
yeah, if anybody else wants to join the group, just let us know. But yeah, thank you all for volunteering. If you all could coordinate on that, we'd love to see what you come up with. Thank you for taking that on. Otherwise, I think we're good. We're still thinking about partnerships. So if you have any more thoughts about that, Adam, I think has like a short video on strategy, and some other, kind of non-mandatory reading materials on that if you want to do a deeper dive. So we'll be linking all of that on Basecamp. But otherwise, we'll see you all next week. Thank you, everyone.
Have a great rest of the day, everyone.
You as well.